Hello, hello. This is the Maya Artifact episode number 4138. Today's date is July 4, 2026. It's been almost like 11 12 p.m. Okay, I'm recording Artifact bit late. Okay, so let's just jump into the question. Okay, let's go. All right. So question is, how will you fund the development? Okay, what exactly is this question? Well, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build application called My Artifact. What exactly is this application? When you write the diary every single day, you cannot able to be write the diary the way that you wanted to. The reason is that your thought process is actually much more faster than your writing speed. Your writing speed is actually slow is because of you need a pen, you need a paper, you need a convenience, and even after that you need to put lot of amount of effort to write your thoughts, but still you cannot able to be right because you cannot able to print your thoughts. But what if instead of because of this writing process is kind of like a much more difficult, that's why very less people are kind of like a writing a diary, almost no one at all. Okay, what if instead of writing a diary, what if we could record a diary, like a audio record a diary? The stuff that you are kind of like listening right now, this is my audio diary. I called it My Artifact. My Artifact episode number 4138. I am doing this thing for past 11 years. I am doing this thing every single day. Because of writing a diary is a self-reflection process, so as recording a diary, so as recording Artifact is a self-reflection process. It adds so much amount of value inside of me. The person that I became today and person that I will become tomorrow, it is all because of Artifact. Because I get so much amount of value, I wanted to share this value to the people. How do I supposed to share this value? By building an application. My application is somewhat something like a YouTube platform. In a YouTube platform, you kind of like record your video, upload your video, other people kind of like sees your video. Same thing, you kind of like record your artifact, upload your artifact in artifact platform, other people kind of like listen your artifact. There is only one catch is that no one knows your name, your real identity is always kept hidden. Before I wanted to build this application, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences, specifically worst possible consequences. So I went to ChatGPT. I tell my idea, said that this is kind of like idea. Suggest me hundreds of possible consequences in question format. ChatGPT kind of like suggest me hundreds of questions. This is one of those questions. Now regarding about this question, the question says that how will I fund the development in my application or in my app? So right now I am developing, okay, I am building my application, okay, but surely it will require money, okay, yeah. Right now I don't really have any viewers, I don't really have any kind of like any clients or thing, nothing really at all. I am building my application by my own, okay, everything is kind of like doing by myself, okay. Now basically is this thing, when will I really require money? Well, basically it's this thing that I required money when I have so many amount of users who are kind of like using my application, and those are kind of like a recording artifact. I have to be kind of like a save their artifact in a cloud database, specifically Google Cloud database. So Google Cloud database is a kind of like assembly taking charges from me, because kind of like assembly I'm kind of like assembly letting user to save their data in the Google Cloud, and I have to pay them money, okay, to the Google. So right now I don't really have that many users, so I don't really have that many things. But in the future I will have so many things, so many users. So in that situation I have to be kind of like a need kind of like a money. Where that money came from? Well, first of all is that ki I was actually kind of like only focus on couple of things first. Okay, yeah. Uh, Basically, is this thing that ki when I build the application, okay, and when I will have kind of like a couple of thousands of user at least, and they are kind of like a recording artifact. I think that ki I have kind of like a significant growth, not significant, like a just okay thousands of user. If I have thousands of user, good, great, okay, yeah. Then what I do is that ki basically I have to be moved to Pune, okay, and then after that I have to be kind of like a simply start as a kind of like a private company, okay, yeah, because right now Artifact is a kind of like application, okay, but basically when I went to Pune, then possibly is this thing that ki I would kind of like register as my company as a private limited company Artifact, okay. Because of this thing my application like basically it will become my company, okay, yeah. And when it became my company, there is a lot of kind of like a government facility are providing startup to kind of like a for fund and things and that they are not providing that many fund but significant amount of fund so that I would kind of like a survive for at least like a couple of months maybe, probably, okay, yeah. So this is the plan, okay. Another plan is that ki advertise, okay, but still is this thing that na ki if I have kind of like a so less amount of user, like let's just say thousands of user, so in that context no ad agency will kind of like a work with me, or kind of like a somebody that ki they will not gonna pay us money to kind of like a show the advertisement, because the user are almost nothing really at all, like thousands of user are like yeah, they need a kind of like a very strong database of so many users and things and that. So probably is this thing advertisement will gonna work if I will have at least like a like basically 50,000 viewers, sorry 50,000 user. If I have that 50,000 user, then I might kind of like do this thing 50 or maybe at least like a 20,000 user. 1,000 user for that thing advertisement will not gonna kind of like approach, okay. So basically it's this thing I am thinking that ki probably the government money will kind of like survive me for at least like a couple of months. My main focus is that ki kind of like find an investor, because at the beginning I might not have any kind of like a money. My idea is a kind of like a really good, it's a kind of like a social media platform, okay. So higher possible chances that I might get investor, but still not really sure about this thing, because like when you kind of like a think that ki your idea is really good and really great, and you might kind of like a pitch in front of the investor not gonna buy that thing. Why? Because they need a kind of like actual proof and things. Well, I have a proof. I am kind of like a recording Artifact for past 11 year and things and that, but still it does not consider as a proof. They need a kind of like simply the financial proof that this company will kind of like a gain profit, and that is a kind of like a biggest challenge. Because of that, he Artifact is a kind of like a platform where people would kind of like a record the artifact, okay, yeah. The amount of people is actually adding value when they record the artifact, okay. When they record the artifact they feel really good and things and that. But even if the people who are kind of like a recording artifact at early stages, they are not really that much kind of like like at the beginning they are kind of like a very awkward to talk with themselves, because artifact is a kind of like a talking to yourself, and it is kind of like a very much awkward to them to kind of like simply talk, and which is very much actually happened, okay. And because of this thing, okay, user will not gonna kind of like record that many artifact. Even if I have kind of like a thousands of user, in that thousands of user probably kind of like a hundreds of user might gonna record the artifact, or things and that. Okay, I also kind of like I'm not really sure about the number. Probably it will be kind of like even less than that too. Okay, but still, the basically is this thing that key it takes time, at least like maybe a year. Okay, if the user is kind of like a recording artifact for at least like a year, it definitely kind of like add value in them, and when it add value in those people, definitely it kind of like a something, then kind of like a things will kind of like a become much more better. Okay, so what is actually biggest concern for me is that I have to be kind of like a survive for at least like a 1 or 2 year. Okay, 1 or 2 year, and for that 1 or 2 year I have to be kind of like a manage the kind of like a rent what rent like basically whatever the data is actually stored in kind of like a Google database. So Google database is a kind of like a renting a storage, so I have to kind of like pay them money and things and that probably. And this is also really good, like basically they are kind of like a somebody, they have kind of like a cluster regarding about that key, like a pay as much as user. Like basically it's this thing, if the artifact is a kind of like a went viral and so many people are kind of like a using my application, the process will kind of like a become much more smoother. Why? Because of that key my billing system is kind of like a base on pay as a user, not pay as a computer. Okay, like basically I am not kind of like a renting the server, I am kind of like a renting a server for significant amount of time when I have a kind of like a traffic or things. When I will don't have a traffic, then kind of like I will not gonna pay that server. Okay, I mean, so basically it kind of like a really helpful for me. Because of that now, if I kind of like establish my full backend server and things and that, so it's very much costly, and I cannot able to be afford. So yeah, so yes, but money problem will always is there. At least like a beginning kind of like a simply beginning 2-3 year would be kind of like a much more difficult. Okay, yeah, my idea is really good, but still is this thing that key money is a kind of like a thing that key I'm not really sure about that. Now even if I kind of like a found the kind of like a investor, then probably is this thing that is also kind of like a very much challenging for me. Why? Because of that key usually investor is actually kind of like a simply look at the profit point of perspective. They are not looking at how good is your idea and things like that and that. They think that key what is exactly your plan, how do you supposed to be execution plan, what is exactly things that and that, and how much they kind of like get the profit and things and that. And my platform is not kind of like giving them value as quickly as possible, because it's not really possible to kind of like provide value as quickly as possible, because artifact is a kind of like at the beginning it kind of like perform really slow, which is very much kind of like things, because it is, yeah, it kind of like perform very slow. So it is kind of like a very difficult for me to kind of like fund and money and things like that. Money is a kind of like a biggest issue, but I might think that I might gonna survive, not too much, but kind of like simply cut down other things. Probably is this thing that I would kind of like something, I don't know how do I supposed to think. Like basically I was kind of like thinking that I will not gonna move to Pune. I will kind of like stay in my hometown and kind of like do my kind of like run my business. Okay, yeah. Like a one advantage that I will kind of like get when I went to Pune is that I will meet the new investor, or maybe kind of like there is a lot of kind of like somebody startup kind of like something, the culture over there. There are a lot of kind of like angel investors and things and that those are kind of like a funding money to the new startup and things and that, which is kind of like a really good. There is also kind of like a something the so many kind of like assembly, like there is a show called Shark Tank. Okay, yeah, which is also kind of like a really good. I will pitch my idea over there. Probably they are kind of like okay with this thing, they will proceed. If they're not, yeah, but still what I think is that like possibly is this thing that I would not kind of like a thing. And another thing is that even if I found an investor who are kind of like willing to invest, and he kind of like a taking kind of like a kind of like a particular portion of ownership, I will not gonna give the more than 5% of ownership. Okay, yeah, because no, nothing really at all. Why I'm not kind of like a give more than 5% ownership? Because of that na ki artifact is a kind of like a things that are too much. Like too much means what? Too much means like that ki kind of like a somebody, it has a kind of like a so much amount of power that manipulate the entire world and things and that and that. If I'm kind of like a giving most of the ownership right to a kind of like a somebody investor and things and that they are kind of like a somebody utilizing artifact for kind of like a somebody money making system or money making machine, and I don't want it. Okay, like it's not really that I don't want to earn money, but like basically is this thing, I do understand what exactly if you are using artifact for wrong purposes, then how much it kind of like a create destruction in the society, in the things and that and that. Investor don't really focus on that. Investor actually focus on just the amount of money. Okay, they want just money. They don't really care at all. Okay, so that is a kind of like a thing. So, okay, so basically is this thing at the beginning, if someone kind of like a wanted a kind of like ownership, I will not gonna give more than 5%. Okay, yeah. If they are agree with this thing, then probably, yeah, I don't know about that thing. Okay, regarding about that na, money is a kind of like one of the biggest issue probably, but I think that na I could manage, because most of my kind of like a startup is kind of like a based on cloud, based on kind of like a digital infrastructure. Okay, yeah. And since the AI came and things and that kind of like a things very much common, like kind of like a feel like doable. Like basically tomorrow I have to make an application regarding about iOS, then probably I might not get that much difficult, because like yeah, like right now I'm kind of like a building application on Android Studio, and I don't really have any kind of like information regarding about how should you supposed to development, but still I'm kind of like a using agent to kind of like a build my application, which is kind of like a really good, and I'm building it. Okay, yeah. Same goes with the iOS probably. Okay, because in the iOS I could able to be kind of like already have structure in things and that, and I don't know how do I supposed to figure it out probably. Okay, so yes, fund is a kind of like always been kind of like a issue, will be at least like a beginning couple of year, but I have to be manage that thing. Okay, I have to kind of like manage and things. I also kind of like I'm kind of like a saving money since right now. I have kind of like a SIP for 1,000 rupees per month. It's not really too much, but still I'm not really earning any money, so whatever the money that I'm getting, it's yeah. And also I'm kind of like a investing kind of like a 20 rupees per day on gold investment, which is also not really that much, but fine. Okay, my credit score is kind of like really good. I might gonna get loan, but I don't want to take a loan. I don't know, yeah, dude. Money is a kind of like a thing is that na ki, like basically I have to figure it out a lot of stuff regarding about investor, regarding about advertisement and things and that. Well, advertisement, like I was actually focusing on kind of like a let's build the money from advertisement, but the problem is that na the advertisement enter when you have at least like a 50,000 user, and basically if I have 50,000 user na, then game will completely change. Okay, yeah, like basically if I have 50,000 user, then probably is this thing that I would kind of like a control, like basically I would kind of like a add a kind of like a ad structure, and basically I would kind of like a like basically I would kind of like a went to the kind of like advertising agency and kind of like a say this is my platform, sell your advertisement over here, things and that we will kind of like a give you very target audience and things and that, and probably like for the 50,000 user I might earn kind of like a little bit significant, not significant but decent amount of money, so that I would kind of like simply survive, or I would kind of like things and that, then I don't really require any kind of like some investor and things. But still investor is also really essential too. Okay, yeah, because if I wanted to build my application for kind of like a, if I wanted to want to go global and things and that, so in that situation I need money, and possibly that money will not gonna came from advertisement. I need that money from kind of like investor and things and that. So yeah, in that situation I will kind of like, but that situation is kind of like a bit more control, because when I will have kind of like a some significant amount of user, then probably is this thing that I was not kind of like a survive, I was kind of like a somebody that growing. Okay, because when I was in that growing stage now, then probably I would kind of like get the investor advertisement and things and that and that and that, like, yeah. Okay, but at the beginning it is kind of like a very difficult, like basically for at least like a, like basically 1,000 user to at least like a 10,000 user, this is kind of like a journey is kind of like a bit more difficult for me. And yeah, because in that situation marketing is also kind of like a things I have to figure it out. Okay, yeah, so yeah, there is a lot of stuff to do. All right, but right now I am kind of like a somebody saving money. Okay, it would be kind of like a first step to kind of like do this thing, which might gonna help me probably. All right, so this is it. This is then I have to end here, and thank you.